My name is Jason, and this is Just Watches. Today we have the 2022 State of the Collection. These are my favorite types of videos to watch from other watch review channels because I like to see what actually sticks in their collections. And then I also like to make them for myself just to kind of document changes in my collection from year to year. Now, I'm doing my best to keep my collection at 12 watches. This is a large enough number to allow for some variety without being so large that it becomes difficult to wear all the watches I own in a reasonable window of time. I really only keep watches that I enjoy wearing, and I have a couple observations from 5 years in the hobby before we begin. So 75% of my collection is Seiko. Now this isn't intentional, but for whatever reason, Seiko is what ends up sticking in my collection. Second, while I'm drawn to vividly colored dials such as red, yellow, and orange, they don't tend to stick because I don't wear them as often. I used to be confused by collections that were primarily black, blue, and white dials, but that's basically what my collection has become. And then finally, I really like divers and dress watches, as these make up the majority of my collection. Now, I won't go into the details of all these watches. I have a review for each one on my channel if you're interested. So without further ado, here is the 2022 State of the Collection. Alright, first we have the Invicta I-Force. Now this is what started the whole collection, all the madness, the obsession with watches. This was an innocent gift from my wife. Now I was vaguely aware of mechanical watches existing, but I had never owned one. And then having one, especially with an exhibition case back, really got me fascinated with mechanical watches. Next we have the Seiko SRPC39. This was a gift from my father-in-law and is one of the world's first quartz chronographs. Now he had this watch and he didn't wear it that often, so he decided to gift it to me. Actually took it to a watchmaker and had it cleaned up, and it functions perfectly. Now these movements were designed to be serviced and should last a long time. I don't wear this one that often, but it obviously has a very special place in the collection. Next we have the King Seiko 7001. Now I'm not really into vintage watches. They're a little bit of a difficult territory to navigate. You really have to know what you're looking for and what you're getting. But I got really into this particular watch, especially because it has the super high beat movements, and those fascinated me. And then this is from an era where Seiko really bridged the gap with the Swiss as far as accuracy of mechanical movements, so I'm also into kind of the historical aspect of this watch as well. I was gifted an exhibition case back for this watch from a friend, which allows you to appreciate this absolutely beautiful movement. And the next watch is the legendary Sarb033. Now, I actually did something very foolish this year. I sold this watch, and then I missed it and ended up rebuying it a few months later. This is really the only time I've ever sold a watch and missed it so bad that I rebought it, and I've definitely learned my lesson, and I will be holding on to this one. Next we have the Seiko Sarx029. This is one of Seiko's Urushi dial watches, and this dial is actually finished by hand. I got really fascinated by this Urushi dial, this particular one, for a long time, and then I finally decided to get one, and I can say I'm really impressed. The dial doesn't really come through on the camera, but it basically looks like a pool of wet ink all the time. And then the strap on this one I think really complements the whole package with the gold stitching that matches the gold hands. Next we have the Seiko Sarx055. Now I've had this watch for almost 4 years now, and it blows me away still. The level of quality on the dial, hands, indices, and case is extremely high, especially when you consider this watch is titanium and they've really finished it to an incredibly high level. Now the super clear coating renders the crystal almost invisible, which really helps those details of the dial, indices, and hands pop. So this was my wedding watch, and then obviously it holds a very special place in the collection. Next up is the Casio Edifice EFV100D. Now this is the Casio Edifice that has won all 4 Casio Edifice showdowns. I actually owe you a 5th showdown, but let's be honest, this one's going to win again, which is why I've kind of been hesitating on making it. Now this watch is honestly stunning, and it has survived a very long time in my collection, where many other watches have not. When you used to be able to get these for about $60, unfortunately the price has gone way up, but at $60 this watch is kind of a no-brainer and kind of the only watch you should ever buy or ever need. Just buy this one and just forget the rest of the hobby and you will be happy. Next up is the Seiko SRPC39. Now this was a gift from a friend of the channel and also holds a very special place in the collection. I think this mini turtle, or the minnow as I like to call it, is really underappreciated in the Seiko dive watch lineup. It has a unique case shape, has its own kind of unique style. It comes in a number of really cool colorways, but I just don't see this one very often, and I think it's worth checking out, especially if you have a smaller wrist. Next is the Christoper C60 Sapphire. Now, translucent dials have gained in popularity this year, and I think they're really cool. It provides a peek at the movement through the dial without requiring a hole, like with an open heart watch that can kind of break up the dial a little bit too much for some people. Now, Christoper is really in the middle of changing their branding. They're dropping the name and just kind of keeping the flag logo on there. They've also slimmed down their dive watches in their newer releases, so I'll be really interested to see if we get an updated version of this watch in the near future. So next is the Seiko SPB1878. Now, I fell in love with this watch the moment I saw it. I've always been a huge fan of the Marine Master case, but that watch is on the larger side, and I think it's a bit too big for me. So when they did this reduced Marine Master style watch, it instantly had my attention, and I went ahead and picked one up. And I think this is my favorite Seiko diver case shape. I love the large, high polished shoulders and the way the case has a nice gentle curve throughout that really conforms perfectly to my wrist. Next, we have the Seiko Astron SBXY055. Now, I've been curious about Astron for a long time, and this one really intrigued me. It uses the same super clear coating as the Seiko Sarx055, which is something I wish Seiko would do on more of their watches. This watch is also titanium and radio syncs, as well as displays 2 time zones simultaneously. I'm really impressed by this Astron, and I wish they did more of their watches on the smaller size. Even this one I feel like is slightly too big for me, but I gave it a pass just based on how cool it looks. And finally, we have the Grand Seiko SBGN003. This is the grail I finally obtained that didn't make me much happier at all. I love this watch, but I don't think any watch is ever going to satiate my desire for watches, even as much as I was hoping that this one just might do it. So I've kind of embraced that I will likely continue to be a watch flipper, and this also reinforces my decision to try to contain this madness to 12 watches. So there you have it, the 2022 state of the collection. What do you think about my collection? Do I own too many Seikos? I kind of feel like I do, but I just really like them. I don't know what to say. And as always, if you're enjoying the contents of this channel, I invite you to subscribe. And if you like the contents of this individual video, please give it a thumbs up. That's all for this time. My name is Jason, and you have been watching Just Watches.